Okay, now let us go to SD45.17, Sikkhattaya Sutta 2, the second discourse on the three trainings, A3.89. Okay. All right, so the three trainings with verses. Okay, so here this is another basic teaching. Let's go straight into the text itself on page 171, right? 170. Dutiya Sikkhattaya Sutta, the second discourse on the three trainings, A3.89. Bhikshus, there are these three trainings. What are the three? The training in higher moral virtue, the training in higher mind, the training in higher wisdom. Okay? Okay, now once again a reminder, why do we use the word higher here? I mean, normally we talk of the three trainings, right? But here you have Adi, higher. Very simply, we can say here, when you see Adi here, we're talking about going to deeper meditation, right? So especially for renunciants, for monks and nuns, of course for lay people who are serious in their practice. So this is where the higher moral virtue means you keep the precepts in such a way that it will help you to focus your mind better. In fact, the story of Gawesi in the chapter just before this, you can see how Gawesi, who was a layman in Kassapa Buddha's time, started off with keeping the 5 precepts, and he upgraded it to include the celibacy rule, and then the 1 meal a day rule, and then he renounced the world. So you see here, he keeps upgrading his moral training, his moral virtue, right? And then there's the higher mind. So here you have, say in our daily life, we just keep ourselves mindful, reflect on impermanence, and then you bring it more focused, you bring it higher to doing breath meditation, doing loving kindness, and then attaining peace of mind, attaining jhana. And these two experiences, moral virtue and joyful mind, we experience or we cultivate higher wisdom. So higher wisdom here refers to the seeing true reality ever more clearly, ever more fully, right? Seeing firstly the nature of impermanence, understanding the nature of suffering, and then finally seeing non-self. Okay. All right, so these are the basics, okay, the three trainings. Now, the three trainings are they're not exactly sequential, they're more like overlapping. It's like a pyramid, okay? So you have the basis, the foundation is moral virtue, that we need moral virtue as the support. Because once there's moral virtue, then it's easier for the mind to focus, to see itself. So that's the second stage. But there is always this going back and forth. You have this calm mind, loving kindness, for example, also helps us to practice moral virtue. And then from there, the higher level, you have higher wisdom. Okay, let's see what the Buddha has to say about each of this. Section 2. And what bhikshus is the training in higher moral virtue? Here, bhikshus, the monk is morally virtuous, lives restrained by the rules of the monastic code of Patimokkha, possess of proper conduct and resort, seeing danger in the slightest faults, trains himself in the training rules he has undertaken. This pictures is the training in the higher moral virtue. So in this case, we see higher moral virtue referring to monastic training. For a layperson, of course, we adjust accordingly, right? As in the case of Gawesi in the previous chapter. So here what the Buddha is reminding us that it is as a renunciant, as a monk or as a nun, it is easiest for us to attain arahathood and non-return, because that training is specially geared towards mental development of focusing. It's a very kind of a mental life, if you like. Then next section 3, and what bhikshus is the training of the higher mind, right? So this is the training in otherwise training in concentration. Here it says higher mind, adhicitta. So here we're talking about the 4 jhanas. No? Now here bhikshus, the monk, quite secluded from sensual pleasure, secluded from unwholesome mental states, attain and dwell in the first dhyana, accompanied by initial application and sustained application, accompanied by zest and happiness born of solitude. This is a standard definition of the first jhana. Okay? So the first jhana has got 5 factors. So you can see initial application, sustained application is one of them, and then zest, that is a joy, happiness is a calm sense of joy, and then solitude. Okay. So solitude here means the mind is untroubled by the world outside. Okay. So this is the first jhana. A jhana basically means the world, the mind is totally free, at least temporarily, from the 5 senses. Why is that so? Because otherwise the mind has to attend to. The mind becomes a servant, even a slave of the 5 senses. But here, the mind is totally at rest. It is free, so it's able to focus on itself. It's totally joyful. So this is the first jhana. Now then, second jhana, with the stilling of initial application and sustained application. So here means the first 2 of the 5 jhana factors are no more there. Right? So the mind is joyful, and the mind is happy, right? At peace. Then the third jhana, it says, with the fading away of zest. So here even zest, even that joy, here is active kind of joy, settles. There's only this very comfortable sense of joy, that is, the body is comfortable, and that's the third jhana. Now in the fourth jhana, notice with the abandoning of joy and peace, right? So even this subtle happiness also settles down. The mind is totally equanimous. So that's the fourth jhana, total peace, right? So here you can see the higher training refers to the attaining of jhana. But always remember, it's not the attaining of jhana by itself, for itself. The jhana here is like you are polishing your lenses of the telescope. Moral virtue is like you are directing the telescope in the right quadrant, the right area of the universe, whatever planet or stars or nebula you want to watch, you direct it that way, you look at the measurements, and then you kind of adjust all those gears and so on, and then you get the image. Okay? So now, once the image, you can see that object in the sky, in the heavens, that is the jhana aspect. Then comes the wisdom aspect. You begin to study this object in the sky, right? So you begin to know what it's like and so on. Imagine Galileo first looking at all those moons of Jupiter, Then suddenly he realized, wow, look at them. First he saw the moon and he realized actually the moon is not that flat as we imagine. The moon is full of rugged surfaces. So that's wisdom to him, right? Through his telescope. So here, that's the third aspect, wisdom. Look at section 4. And what bhikshu is the training in higher wisdom? Here, bhikshus with the destruction of the mental influxes among realizers with direct knowledge, right here and now, the influx-free liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and having attained it, he dwells in it. So this is another definition of attaining arahathood. Okay. All right. So this is the theory behind the practice. Then the Buddha closes with 5 verses here. Okay. So this verses gives a summary of the practice in a very poetic way. Okay. Verse 5. In higher morality, higher mind, and higher wisdom, one should be energetic, strong, wise, meditative, mindful with restrained faculties. Let one live. Right? So this summarizes what has come before. Then the Buddha tells us in rather poetic style the summary of the teaching. Now I want you to pay extra attention to this very interesting verse. As before, so after. As after, so before. As below, so above. As above, so below. All right? Now, there are different ways of interpreting this. Once you have poetry, it depends on your understanding of the Dhamma, your practice, and so on. One way of interpreting this is, as before, so after. When you study the suttas, when you study the Dhamma, you have to look for the best, the original sources. What better than the suttas? So this is the before. In other words, this is what was taught before by the Buddha. So after, right? So now in our own time, we have all these texts. We study them. So we got to make sure the text that we are studying, the teaching that we are getting, is the same as the one before. As before, so after, right? So that the teachings we are practicing now are what has been handed down from the Buddha himself. As after, so before. Okay? So this is the second line. What does this mean? After here refers to after the Buddha's time. That means our own time right now. We have so many kind of disciplines today. We can look at Buddhism from sociology, psychology, and so on. So we have to be very mindful that we do not read too much into Buddhism. In other words, make Buddhism a tool of, say, our studies rather than using it as a method of personal development, of meditation and awakening. So as after here refers to how we treat, how we look at Buddhism today. We should not turn it into something worldly and for the wrong purposes. Like we should remind ourselves, what is it that the Buddha is teaching all this Dhamma for? Very simply, it is to keep our body and speech healthy in our service, not to bring us suffering. Number 2, it is to help clear our minds so that we are happy here and now. And thirdly, we have this basic wisdom at least, so that we know what the world really is. And then from there we go on to be liberated and attain awakening just like the Buddha. So this is where, as what we have right now, should reflect what was in the Buddha's time too, in terms of the Dharma, that is. As below, so above. As above, so below. Now here, if you're not sure, you look at the notes are in front. 2.3.2. Yeah, 232. No? So One way you can look at above below is you can say whether we live here in this world or we go higher into the higher realms, you find we are still ruled by the same principle of impermanence. That's one. So you can get caught up in this before and after. So we've got to understand that wherever we go, whether it's below or whether it is high up there, the rule of impermanence still rules, still the same, right? So this is one reflection we can do. Then the next verse 7, as by day, so by night, as by night, so by day. He has overcome all the quarters with immeasurable stillness. As by day, so by night. So this refers to the meditator's practice, right? So you keep up your practice in the daytime, so it's the night time, with the rest in between, of course. Okay? To get the real full effect of meditation, to attain arahathood, non-returning, you have to practice full time, right? So this is the advice the Buddha gives us. Now, understandably, we would expect the Buddha to tell us to practice for the highest, right? So and from there, if you can't, then you do simpler practice. Okay? So, now there's one more I forgot to mention, as before, so after. It's just like reflecting on as this is, so was that, as that is, so will this be. Also, it's a reflection on impermanence, on death. Okay, when we visit a wake and someone has passed away, especially if someone you know well, it's good to be able to see the person's body. So you just stand there and reflect with the eyes open before you do the chanting with closed eyes. You reflect and say, okay, look at this person I know so well, and this person is now dead. So as he is right now, so will I be. So this is a reality check. As I am, so was he. Right? So in other words, before he was happy, alive. So this is something that happens to all of us. So this is a very powerful reflection on impermanence, and that will remind us of what really mattered to us in this life, in other words. So it's not something morbid, it's not to feel negative at all. It is more about how to value this present life. So we put in the effort to attain what needs to be attained. All right? Then we have the next verse, 8. Such a person, right, he is called the trainee of the path. That means he has attained at least stream winning, whose conduct is fully self-purified. He is called awakened in the world. Say awakened, but still in the world, all right? The wise hero who has reached the path's goal. That's the last line, refers to the Arahat. Then the last verse 9, with the end of consciousness, he is liberated by the destruction of craving, extinguished, attain nirvana, just like a torch, is the liberation of the mind. So this is a very beautiful way of putting how awakening occurs, nirvana arises. It arises with the end of consciousness. Consciousness refers to the interaction between our senses and the world. So when the last consciousness is gone, not to arise again, that is nirvana in the case of the arahats, right? In the case of others, this consciousness keep on arising. Okay? So when consciousness finds no footing, it does not arise at all, that is called nirvana. So there you are, you have this teaching on the 3 trainings where the Buddha talks about renunciation and the benefit of becoming a monk, right? And if you find that is difficult for you, then you can take a step back and practice the way of stream winning, okay, of reflecting on impermanence, and that will put you on the path. It takes a little longer, but still, we have all the time in the world. The idea is to get to the path as soon as possible. Okay, so it's just nice the timing. We'll finish this sutta. Any questions or feedback?
This sutta talks about moral virtue. The previous sutta on Kamesi talks about moral conduct.
Oh, yes.
Are they the same?
They're the same. They're the same. They refer to the same practice, actually. Moral virtue, we can say, refers also to the state of mind behind the practice. But the word is sila. Sila can be translated either way. Sila. Yes, sila can be. Sila is sometimes translated as habitual conduct. Yeah. So in the Pali text, it is sila, samadhi, panya. So sila is dealing with the body and speech.
The morality in Buddhism obviously means something much higher than our normal morality.
Yeah, I would say that, yes.
Because normal morality means you be good,
Yeah. That will be.
You just do what is right and don't do what is wrong.
Yes, what is right. That's ethics, yeah.
In Buddhism, it's much higher.
Definitely, yeah.
Right in accordance with the law of the country.
That's one.
That's called worldly morality, conventional morality. So you have spiritual morality is more for personal development, whereas the other one is for social well-being. Yeah. So we need both. Yeah.
Because if I understand it, morality here involves celibacy.
Yeah.
Involves not only keeping the precepts, but taking one meal a day.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Those are extra rules that we voluntarily can take. Yeah.
Talking about this celibacy, we are always talking about physical celibacy, no sexual intercourse. But rarely have I found a reference to mental celibacy.
They include both in this case. They include both because you see it's a problem with the language, I think here. In Pali, brahmacharya. Brahma here means literally, if you follow the Indian word, the Brahma is the high God. See, it's like living God's life. See, so this is what the non-Buddhists, the word they use, Brahma, the high God. See, they have the what do you call it? The Trinity, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu. Okay, so but to the Buddha, Brahma also means perfect, divine, in the sense that it is something you cultivate inside. It is godliness. It is not God as a being, as a person, but God as a being in the sense that you can cultivate these qualities. Okay? For example, the Buddha, he was saying that the Brahmins are not behaving the way they should. They claim to say that they show the way to God, but do they behave like Brahma? Do they behave like God? For example, God doesn't have a wife, he doesn't have a family, God doesn't use money, God doesn't own property, So, but look at these Brahmins, they're enjoying life, they have children, and they eat a lot, and so on. So, brahmacharya, the idea is to have this proper state of mind where you don't think of others as things to appropriate, to want to enjoy. Okay, so sexuality actually has to do with appropriation, right? So the attitude is very important. So you cannot just not do it. You must also be happy in order not to do it. Otherwise, you're going to you have to have a double life, which is going to create another kind of problem. So celibacy is not for everyone. It's only when you are ready. So you've got to build up the precepts first, in other words. Okay? And then you've got to do the proper kinds of meditation to go along with that. For example, if there's a lot of lust, and you look at all these stages of decay of the body, the impurities and so on. So that helps us to clear away those thoughts. Because it's the thought that drags us back into the world. Okay? Anything else?
What about this? In our day-to-day life.
Sorry?
In our day.
Yes.
Many of us meet a lot of monks or so-called renunciants. Is there any way that we can identify, this guy is an arhat?
No.
No.
Unless you are yourself one. I mean, you can claim, of course. Normally, people who like a monk very much will declare an arahat. They will canonize. But that is a very wrong thing to do. Because in doing so, then you are making a false claim yourself that I am better than this monk. I can tell you he's an arahat. So we can't do that. Right? Because it's not like a certification. It's different, Because we're talking about letting go. Whereas in the world, certification means you collect things and you measure things, whereas Buddhism is just the opposite. It's non-measurement, non-measuring. And again, even if you know someone is an arahat, it is totally useless to you if you're not one. On the contrary, it might be even harmful. You can go around priding and say, oh, my teacher is an arahat, right? So there are a lot of people, for example, if a monk is not wise, will say, oh, Achan so-and-so is my teacher, and he has this, and everyone say, whoa, wow, and they support him for the wrong reasons, you see. You may have a great Achan or teacher who is awakened, but you are not. So there's a problem there, you see. You have in the Jataka story where you have this, I think it's a wild boar, this jungle animal who's very dirty, but he covers himself with a lion skin, and he thinks it's a lion. So until one day he gets into a lot of trouble. So we have to, what the Buddha is saying, you follow the path of the arahat. That's much better. That's the same thing. The Brahmins claim, I know God. You can see God through me. See, this is what the Brahmins claim. The Buddha say, should not say that. You practice the Brahma Viharas yourself. That's much better than claiming to be God. So, because these are identifying, these are, what do you call that, measuring things. So we have to be very careful about measuring. Sometimes, because our society today, measuring is very important. It's not that we can't deny it. In fact, I have this student. Many years ago, he was in the university. He was one of my students. Now he's, I suppose, nearing retirement already. It's amazing how quickly people age. He told me something very interesting. I was talking about Buddhism is immeasurable. The world is measuring. He says, well, that's the way the world is. Everything is measured. From the you are born, you are measured. What your worth is, how much pay you're going to get. So wherever you go, you are measured. Right? That's the world, you see. But that doesn't mean it is right, because there are many things in life you can't measure. The good things, the best things in life, you can't really measure. You can't measure love. You can't measure happiness. You can't measure beauty. I mean, you can try to, put a price on it, but the reality is so subjective. And ultimately, when you have this joy in your mind, how do you measure it? There's no way of measuring. There's no unit for how much joy or beauty there is. So that is why Buddhism is relevant, because the Buddha talks about not counting. It says the arahat cannot be reckoned. The arahat cannot be counted. It's just the opposite of the world. The Buddha says that His teaching is Patisotagami, it's against the current of the world, against measuring. That is why Buddhism is relevant, because the world measures. Buddhism doesn't. At least we should not. But if you see today in the urban areas, Buddhism is becoming another means of measuring. So that's where it is wrong, of course. So it's still possible to live a life when you don't have to measure. That's why we have holidays. That's why we stop measuring. We just relax. We can do what we like. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to measure it. We just relax. That's called a holiday, which is originally a holy day. Okay? So we can take a break from the world. That is why we need to renounce the world, renounce measuring, in other words. Okay? If I were to measure my work, I say, okay, I will do so much of sutta translation. I will give up halfway. If like 17 years ago, I say, okay, I'm going to do 54 volumes, I say, wow, it's really scary, right? So it is something that I do when I feel, I must have the feeling for it, and I stop when I'm tired. So it's a joy to do it. So in a sense, I don't really measure it. I mean, if you notice when you love someone, you don't measure. Say, okay, I've given you so much money, you're going to give back to me, huh? Right? We don't talk like that, right? So that is what brings us true happiness. Okay? I've written a few reflections on this recently, these few days. You can look up in the Facebook. In fact, today, I think was it this morning or last night, I wrote something about samsaric karma and nirvanic karma. Karma that keeps you in this world and the karma that frees you from this world. So samsaric karma is the karma of measuring, whereas nirvanic karma is the karma of non-measuring. So these are ways to help us see the world and how to get along. And we're not saying that people should completely stop measuring, give up measuring. That's not possible. That's the way of the world. In a sense, if all that stopped, then you don't need Buddhism, It's because all this measuring exists. The Buddha is saying there's a way out, Anything else? Well, we are nearing the end of this book also. There's a couple of lessons more. Okay, let us close this study then for today. Today we have studied this sutta which talks about practice in stages. Even as a lay person, we start from where we are. The very first thing is we are humans and we have this capacity and capability to think and also not to think, to feel, to look deeper at ourselves, this kind of self-awareness. And it is this kind of ability that frees us from what otherwise limits us. So Buddhism is just that, to use the self to free the self, the mind, freeing us from the idea that we are suffering, that we are not good enough, and so on. So this is where the suttas tell us to do more, not to stop, right? To go on practicing. And if you go on practicing, somehow the fruit, the joy awaits you. Before you know it, you will experience it. Reflecting in this way is very good karma. Better power of such karma. May we be well and happy. May our minds be at peace. May we be blessed with courage and wisdom to at least attain stream winning, aspire to stream winning in this life itself. May all those people that we care for, that we love, to be well and happy. May those who are practicing the Dharma to see the fruits of their practice in this life itself in a happy way. May those who are lost or have difficulty, may they to see the Buddha's path in this life itself. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.